Hi, in this video I'm going to discuss with you methods for uh, taking research notes for your National History Day project. We're going to look at direct quotations as well as paraphrasing, and then we're also going to look at taking your notes using the Notecard method. So I'm going to use the research guide that you guys all have, and I'm going to scroll down to page 9. Go to the section called Taking Notes. So now that you have compiled a preliminary outline and you now have the specific areas of consideration or slugs, sometimes I refer to these as categories of analysis, now you need to read intensively those sources that contain information relative to your working outline. So here are some things to be considerate of when you're taking notes. Number one, be selective. That is to say, don't quote everything in the book. The reason why is because as you begin to get more sources, you will run into the problem of actually having too much material recorded and or noted. So be selective to what you really want to prove in your project. You want to be accurate. We'll discuss that in a little more detail later. You want to read critically. Don't assume that everything you read is truthful or is valid. Remember, everything will contain bias, and it is important that you're using sources that are as truthful or as accurate historically as possible. So using those sources that we've discussed, like the Library of Congress, the National Archives, sources like that, the sources that are contained on the National History Day Research Central, is a real good place to go. Now, many of you guys have done some type of research project before in the past. This hopefully isn't the first time you've ever done a research-based project. And maybe in the past you've used different methods for taking notes, like the handwritten note card method that we're going to use. But in addition, maybe you've done photocopying, highlighting, downloading material from the internet, cutting and pasting off of the web into Word documents, those sorts of things. And those are all good methods. However, I've used with great success the handwritten note card method. It is decidedly untechnological, but it is an old but time-tested method, and I think you'll get a lot from it. Now, let's talk about using direct quotations and paraphrasing, because these are two of the major ways in which you take notes for History Day. So, direct quotations. According to the MLA, or Modern Language Association, quote, when you believe that some sentence or passage in its original wording might make an effective addition to your paper or National History Day project, transcribe that material exactly as it appears, word for word, comma for comma. Includes all direct quotations in quotation marks, even on your note cards. That way you'll be absolutely sure that it was, in fact, a quotation. Copy the quotation exactly as it appears in its original source, including spelling, internal punctuation, and capitalization. Now here's the catch though. If you are certain that the original contains an error, for example in spelling, use the word sic, S-I-C. Usually though that is in italics, from the Latin word thus or so. And that lets the reader know that the error is accurately reproduced. All right, refer to the section of on alteration or quoted material in the handbook. Okay, so that's direct quotations. Direct quotations can be very powerful when citing experts on a particular topic. It lends credibility and it lends authority to your National History Day project, and it also helps you to convince your judges that your History Day thesis is correct. Another way to do note-taking is through paraphrasing. To paraphrase a passage is to restate the material not in the original author's words, but in your own words. All right, what does that mean? Well, read the material carefully. That is, absorb the ideas, and then I want you to close the book and write the ideas in your own words. Check your version against the original to make sure that you have accurately and completely conveyed the author's ideas. That's very important. So let me give you some do nots for paraphrasing. Do not use more than 3 words in succession. 3 words of the author. Okay, the reason why is because if you do, you're no longer paraphrasing, you're quoting. Do not follow the identical structure, sentence patterns of the original passage, or simply change the words in order. And the reason why is because, again, we want this to be a paraphrase of the author's main ideas, not the main author's wording. And do not distort the meaning of the original passage. A paraphrase is simply recapturing in your own words the author's original intent, not an opportunity for you to skew or to change the author's meaning to suit your agenda. And lastly, do not use quotation marks to identify any unique terms or phraseology retained in the paraphrase. We don't want that to be confused with a direct quote. Okay, so those are the 2 major ways that we take notes, direct quotations and paraphrasing. Now, we're going to discuss the method to take those notes, and that method is using note cards. Note cards, we're talking about 3x5 index, and I'll give you guys an example of what that looks like in just a second. So while writing on note cards from sources, keep these guidelines in mind. Number 1, write only write only on the front of the index cards, no front and back, and I'll show you why later. Address only one idea per card. It's real easy to get into the habit of trying to fill those cards up with as much information as you can, and sometimes that means adding 1 or 2 or 3 ideas. Don't do that, and the reason why is because by putting 1 idea per card, you're then able to organize your ideas much more independently than if ideas were stacked onto 1 card. Then lastly, write the appropriate slug from the working outline at the top of the index card to indicate the subject. So again, working slug could also mean the category of analysis or the idea that is in your preliminary outline. Then write the first item given on your bibliography card. That is the author's name, editor's name, or article title at the bottom of the card. Now, we're not using bibliography cards. We're using a annotated bibliography, but same idea. Just take that information off of that and put it at the bottom. Use quotation marks for exact quotes and give exact page numbers for your print sources. That's absolutely essential that you include that information. The reason why is because if you need to go back to verify a quote, maybe you want greater context, you want to know the context in which that quote was taken, or you just want to make sure that you have the wording of that quote absolutely right, you need to include the page numbers. So here is what the card should look like for a direct quote. Notice at the top, using the slug from the preliminary outline to describe the content of the note card. So this card is about Anglo-Saxon life. Use quotation marks to indicate the direct quotation, and there it is right there. Use ellipse points to indicate that words have been omitted. Let's say what they're talking about here, guys, is you use the ellipse or 3 dots if there's a whole bunch of information that you don't really need, that you kind of want to cut out, but you have to indicate that you are omitting information from your direct quote. That's what an ellipse is for. Use square brackets or interpolation, that's these right here, to indicate that a word has been changed from the original. Let's say that the word is so archaic and whatnot that no one would understand what that word means. You might want to change that. I would recommend not doing that, but just in case you need to, that's the proper way to do it. And then lastly, write the author's last name and the exact page with no comma at the bottom. So here's the author's last name, and then here's the page number. Notice there is no comma at the bottom of each card. Okay, so that's basically how to take to make an index card using direct quotations. Guys, History Day judges love direct quotations. Again, it makes your arguments more powerful. You're using sources that are hopefully experts in their field and that can really strengthen your overall thesis. The next thing I want to look at is paraphrasing note cards. And in this section, what we have for you is a paraphrasing example And so here's an original passage, and I'm not going to go through and read this only because I know all of you have this research guide and you can do that on your own. And then here's a note card with the paraphrase. And notice obviously that this is considerably shorter than the original passage, and it is adhering to all those conventions that we talked about earlier in terms of paraphrasing. Notice though that all of the other information is exactly the same. So the plug or the category of analysis, the idea, main idea is up here. The author's last name with the page number is located at the bottom. It's one idea per card, and there's nothing on the back. Okay, so that's how to take notes using the note card method for direct quotations and for paraphrases. The last thing I want to talk about today is plagiarism. So plagiarism is a writer's fact, idea, or unique phraseology and sentences structures should be regarded as the writer's intellectual property. Any person who uses a writer's ideas without giving due credit through documentation is guilty of plagiarism. So it's important that you document both paraphrases and direct quotations. Use quotation marks for directly quoted material, and do not use more than 3 words in succession from the original source. Why? Because if you do, then you are quoting directly. In deciding whether or not to document, you need to ask yourself this basic fundamental question. Is this information common knowledge? That is, a mature reader would most likely know? So for example, if you were to say that air contains oxygen, well, you don't really need to quote that because that's something that most mature readers most likely already know. Common knowledge. If the answer to the question is yes, then you don't need to document it. However, if the answer to the question is no, you must cite your source. Okay, so that concludes the video today on researching and compiling note cards for direct quotes and for paraphrasing. Thanks for watching.